Hello again, everybody. Time once again for the Silver Bullets podcast. I'm Michael Citro.
And I'm Chip Minnich.
Chip, Happy New Year, my friend.
Happy New Year to you, Michael.
I wonder how long this goes on for people that have not talked since the previous year. Like, what's the cutoff date where you're not allowed to say Happy New Year anymore?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if there is any kind of statute of limitations on when you can extend good wishes to somebody. We're only a couple days into the new year. You would think that people kind of stop doing it after a certain period of time, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, as we record this on the 3rd, just 2 days removed from an Ohio State victory that neither of us saw coming. This is, although I don't think either of us is shocked, it's just that we kind of thought something else would happen.
No, that's fair. I think, it was definitely, as you said, we both predicted Utah to win, but we certainly, I wouldn't say that we fell into the category of, Ohio State has no chance. I mean, it was close on both of our score predictions, and I'm certainly happy that it turned out the way it did.
Yeah, I had Utah 34-30. You had them 38-31. So, one score game, and that could go either way depending on turnovers and whatnot.
Exactly, and it was pretty tight up until about 12 seconds left in the game. So
yeah, it looked like we were both going to be correct in our picking the winner, and way off with the score because Ohio State's defense did not start the game very well in this game.
No, Ohio State defensively, I'm sure that's what we'll be talking about for the majority of the podcast, is a lot of things that need to be fixed, even though Ohio State did come out on the winning end in the Rose Bowl. And I'm sure that new defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, who officially took over as of yesterday, I'm sure that he's going to be poring over the 2021 game film and the 2022 Rose Bowl and finding a lot that he can hopefully fix between now and next season.
Are we sure that he didn't show up at halftime?
Well, I'm going off of what I'm sure that you have read, maybe our listeners have read, that I guess there were some inspired speeches at halftime, so who's to say?
Yeah. All right, before we get into the game, just some quick Buckeye news. Master Teague is going to go pro. Master Teague has had a tough slog of it at Ohio State, finding playing time. It appeared he was going to be the heir apparent to J.K. Dobbins. That didn't really happen, and Travion Henderson is just too good to keep off the field, and Mayan Williams has also developed. And Teague never really sort of recovered his footing, as a potential starter. He really had a chance to seize the position and never really did.
I would agree with that. I think, it was just one of these things where it was rather unfortunate that J.K. Dobbins had that spectacular year, and everyone was kind of thinking, okay, well, Master Teague, because, I think Ohio State fans, their memories are selectively short. When Master Teague would play in blowouts as a redshirt freshman, would have, what comes to mind immediately is Ohio State blowing out Northwestern in 2019 at Northwestern, having, like a long touchdown run, those kind of things that people thought, okay, well, it's just going to go from J.K. Dobbins to Master Teague with little or no drop-off, and there was a drop-off. Let's face it. I think Master Teague, that's not to shortchange him, but just a different style of back altogether from J.K. Dobbins. And Trey Sermon came in, obviously had a terrific year last year, even with everything, the COVID issues that the team and the country experienced. And then, as you said, Travion Henderson kind of, took over. So he, as you said, I don't think he was ever able to truly claim the starting running back spot as his own. That's not to say that the coaches didn't give him ample opportunity. It just, I think his style of play just never really fit with what Ryan Day wanted to do offensively for Ohio State.
Yeah, and you and I have talked on this show about perhaps his body type and what he's good at might translate more to a fullback in the pro game, or at least a short yardage back.
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, it would be, I think it would be rather presumptuous of me to say that, oh, that's how every NFL team will see him. But I mean,
Hmm.
physically, I mean, he is imposing. I mean, when you
Yes.
look, I mean, like he is certainly a load to bring down. By all indications that I know that you and I have either read or seen online, when it came to the testing of Ohio State football players, he ranked near the top in terms of just straight line speed, obviously, physical strength. He was always a dependable receiver out of the backfield. So I,
Hmm.
just by my amateur perspective, is that I would think a team that maybe not necessarily looking to use the stereotypical fullback, but more of, okay, a guy that, yeah, he's going to block, but be more of that receiver out of the backfield. Um, I think he definitely seems to me that he could fill a roster spot with those skill attributes.
Yeah. Of course, our lasting impression that we'll have of him is his 2019 season when he backed up Dobbins, and he would come in often in the fourth quarter and just rip through teams that were already worn down from having to deal with not only J.K. Dobbins but the Ohio State offensive line for 3 quarters, 3.5 quarters, and Master Teague would just make absolute mincemeat out of him.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I said, when he got a full head of steam, he was certainly not. I wouldn't want to have to be the one responsible for tackling him.
Yeah.
Like you said, mincemeat. I think that would definitely be. That would probably be generous in terms of what he would have done to me if I was trying to tackle him. But I think the issue always was just that lack of lateral agility and for lack of a better word, wiggle.
Hmm.
That he didn't in comparison to the J.K. Dobbins, Trey Sermon, Travion Henderson. He was fine when it came to, all right, straight, like off tackle or straight up the middle, not a problem. But if you have to make somebody miss, or if you need to cut back because the hole that you were supposed to run through has been filled and you need to cut back against, that was not him. And I think it just kind of showed starting, basically, I guess you could say at the end of the 2019 game against Clemson, when J.K. Dobbins was, we kind of saw a glimpse of that.
Yeah. So if he had ever developed a hop step in the hole, I mean he just wouldn't have been a fair player to even play against.
Like I said, I mean, he's
That jump cut.
physically, jump cut, whatever, however you want to, to me, I always say that, when, it's just one of these things where you can just tell the agility of certain players at the running back position, and Master Teague unfortunately just he just doesn't have that. That's not an indictment. That's not saying that he's a bad player. It's just
Right.
that for that style of offense, I think that Ryan Day kind of tried to make it work, and it just never really seemed to come to fruition.
Yeah. Well, we wish him luck. Certainly, as a Buckeye entering professional ranks, he will hopefully go on and do the school proud.
Well, I certainly think he will. I mean, he had a very eloquent Twitter, I guess you could say, announcement. I mean, it was actually him reading what you can read as well as what you can hear. I know that he is, and this is not meant to get on some kind of a spiritual soapbox per se. I know that his faith is very strong and important to him.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what, I mean, I know he already graduated. I think the fact that he definitely he admitted that things never really worked out the way that he had hoped, but he truly cherished his time in Columbus. So I have no doubt that he's going to do Ohio State fans and Ohio State graduates proud wherever and whatever he does.
Yeah. The other thing that we wanted to touch on just briefly is that, with Marcus Freeman taking over as the head coach at Notre Dame, he did not have a great first game as being in charge of the bowl, but obviously a lot of turmoil, a lot of changes yet to come for the Irish. And he has added the little animal, James Laurinaitis is joining Marcus Freeman's staff, and James Laurinaitis is a player, obviously, that everybody listens to this show. Every Ohio State fan will have fond memories of James, and I thought, for my money, he was a really good television analyst as well.
Absolutely. And I think this is going to be the kind of move by, I guess you could say by James Laurinaitis that, I know Ohio State fans are going to be really, like depending on how it works out. And I have no doubt in my mind that James Laurinaitis is going to give his utmost effort. That everyone's gonna be like, why didn't Ohio State hire him? And and I'm again, this is just pure speculation on my part, is that from what I seem to recall, that there were discussions between James Laurinaitis and Ohio State, but maybe at the time that it wasn't a right fit, or maybe it wasn't the right role. And obviously the connection between James Laurinaitis and Marcus Freeman, who, from what I understand, not only were they great teammates, but they've remained a very close personal friendship. I think that that probably was a major impact in James Laurinaitis' decision to go to South Bend and become involved on the Notre Dame coaching staff.
Yeah, exactly. And Jim Knowles coming in for Ohio State is going to be doing his own coach recruiting. We don't know what all coaches will be leaving and retained. We do know that Matt Barnes is he has a place to go.
Yeah, congratulations to Matt Barnes. I mean, it was, and we're still speculating about who may be staying, who may be leaving. Matt Barnes, I thought, as I said a moment ago, I thought congratulations, on a job well deserved. Obviously, the fact that he served as I guess you could say, as the game day defensive coordinator, like, for lack of the reason I'm kind of stammering over it, I'm trying to think of, because let's face it, I mean, like, Kerry Combs maintained that title,
right?
Not calling the defense after the second game of the season. So Matt Barnes, now granted, everyone was, pretty much unhappy with the entire defensive coaching staff, not only against Michigan, but also at, we're going to talk about the Utah game. So the fact that he has an opportunity to kind of go and establish himself on his own accord throughout the entire offseason, throughout the entire spring, football opportunity to kind of make his imprint on Memphis, I wish him nothing but the best and sincere gratitude for what he did during his time in Columbus, because I know it wasn't easy.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, on Saturday, I tweeted this. I was frustrated and not happy with the way things were going. And I said, look, Jim Knowles, my permission to clean house. I didn't say it in those words, but he does, because nothing that we saw against Utah to start that first half, was acceptable by Ohio State standards, and acceptable when you look at the talent that is on that defense.
Exactly. No, I mean, I know we're going to talk about it in greater detail, but defensively, I mean, it was dreadful that entire first half. I mean, they made a dramatic improvement at the half, but like you said, I think Jim Knowles, what I like about this hire, and this is just one person's opinion, maybe you have a different one, maybe our listeners have different opinions, is what I respect about Ryan Day is that he saw issues with the defense. He tried to correct them early in the season. We just talked about the adjustment of Kerry Combs to Matt Barnes, and then after the painful loss to Michigan, he said, okay, what we're doing, we can't continue doing that, and he went out and hired the best defensive coordinator that he felt could best serve Ohio State. And this is kind of where I'm going with this. There's no connection to any previous Ryan Day / Urban Meyer relationship. And that's not meant in a disparaging fashion, but I think that, for the last several years, that it's been, okay, well, this guy used to coach with Urban Meyer, or this guy used to coach with Ryan Day. He went out and found a guy that I think it remains to be seen, but I think he's giving him pretty much full autonomy on the defense to come in and do what needs to be done to get it back to what you would consider, you and I or any of our listeners would consider, an Ohio State championship level defense.
Yeah. Yeah, and right now we're at a time, Chip, when defense is at a distinct disadvantage with regard to the offense. The offense has a lot of advantages over the defense in the way the game is played, the way the game is officiated, and so you have to have not only great recruits, you have to develop those players to tackle well, to read the game well. You have to minimize the other team's opportunities because you can't be giving up 40 points. Even mediocre teams nowadays can probably put up 24 points most games. You just can't play a good team and expect to win with a defense that isn't tackling, isn't getting to the point of attack, is caught out of position, is confused, all of that stuff. We saw a little bit of all of that on Saturday.
Oh, we saw a little of that, and unfortunately more so. Yeah, it remains to be seen how Jim Knowles, as he comes in, and I know that kind of the for lack of a better word, like the Zen-like kind of persona, like the Phil Jackson kind of, the fact that he is a vegetarian and likes to, practice yoga, and in the words of his former boss, Mike Gundy, he referred to him as a mad scientist. All that stuff is I think leads to dramatic speculation about what kind of a coach Jim Knowles is. But I think that there's going to be, in the days, weeks, months to come, there's going to be a lot of adjustment. I can only speculate by Jim Knowles in terms of getting the defense the way he would want it to be, the way he would want it to be coached and ultimately performed on the field.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Chip, are you ready to talk about the Rose Bowl?
Let's talk about the Rose Bowl.
All right.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Ohio State goes out there and falls behind, trails most of the game, and yet somehow comes away with a 48-45 victory over the Utah Utes. And when I say somehow, basically it's by having two players play out of their freaking minds is how most of that happened.
Oh, easily. I mean, this was, watching it, I mean, this was definitely a surprise. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna use that term. I don't want to, you and I last week, we when we were predicting the Rose Bowl, we were, okay, well, Utah, they're gonna do anything they can to double cover Jackson Smith-Njigba because he's the only, and never ever anticipated the performance that we saw, and that's certainly, I don't want to take anything away from C.J. Stroud because he was the guy getting him the ball.
Yeah, well, we kind of outlined many reasons why we thought Utah would win the game. Obviously, the opportunity for Utah was, much more enticing than it was for Ohio State. The opportunity to play in the Rose Bowl for Ohio State players was a disappointment because their goal was to win the Big Ten championship, get to the college football playoff. That didn't happen, so you have a little bit of a disappointment there. Utah's excited, never been to the Rose Bowl. They were a little bit more motivated. They're the lower-ranked team, so you get the underdog factor. You've got the fact that Ohio State had these players that opted out of the game. And we've seen, even when one of the big two starting wide receivers wasn't in the lineup, we've seen a noticeable drop in production and noticeable issues. And so we had no real inkling that the freshman would come in and just absolutely play fantastic football, but that's exactly what happened. And like you said, we thought, okay, Utah's going to come out, stop the run with their good linebackers. They're going to put some numbers in the box, and they're going to put two guys on Jackson Smith-Njigba and say, beat us with someone else. And for some reason, Utah didn't do that.
That's going to be the off-season, I guess, I don't want to say critique, The question that I think if I was a Utah fan, I'd be about Kyle Whittingham. Why didn't you put more of an effort on trying to stop Jackson Smith-Njigba, knowing that they were down, both Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson? Now, from what I gleaned from the telecast, that Utah secondary coming into it was their Achilles heel, which obviously Ohio State successfully exploited. But again, it begs the question: all right, why don't in terms of making some adjustments? Doing something like whenever Jackson Smith-Njigba went in motion, okay, like, we need to do something, because I mean, it was obvious that he was going to be the primary target of CJ Stroud whenever or wherever he went, that CJ Stroud was certainly going to try to find him if and when he could.
Yeah, it was like, and they were down a few of their starters too in the secondary, and I understand all that. And but even if you have two players that are backups, if they're both covering the guy and making you go somewhere else, then you're forcing C.J. Stroud to throw it to Marvin Harrison Jr. or Emeka Egbuka or the tight end or whoever. You're making somebody beat you, and that's kind of the philosophy that Bill Belichick always uses, is that I'm going to take away what you want to do most and make you beat us left-handed. And Kyle Whittingham wasn't able to do that, and I don't know if he was being formationed or schemed or what. I'll leave that up to Ross Fulton to dissect. But to me, it just seemed like, hey, just play everybody straight man to man, put two guys on 11, and let the chips fall where they may.
I agree with everything you just said about how the typical Bill Belichick approach, like, okay, I'm going to find out what it is that you love to do and what it is that you do best and take it away from you. Mm-hmm. And again, we're purely looking at it from, okay, well, that's how I would have handled it. Mm-hmm. And maybe
seems pretty easy.
Well, yeah, and there's a reason why, it's like, I'm sure that, and we'll get into it, talking about, the performance of Utah, specifically one Clark Phillips, who, how many times were we reminded about how he was supposed to be playing for Ohio State, but flipped right before National Signing Day to sign with Utah. Uh-huh. Maybe it was because, Clark Phillips was only one guy in that secondary. He could, as great as he played, he couldn't be responsible for everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Utah got the ball first, and Ohio State did force a punt on the first drive of the game, and that was a rarity in the first half.
Oh, yeah. That punts in general. Yeah. That was very, very rare.
Yeah. The Buckeyes were not able to run the football. They tried to come out running the football and establish that. It wasn't working. I felt like there was some real issues trying to formulate what the play calling was going to be for the game, or maybe settling into their game plan early. Maybe it was nerves, or maybe it was just a matter of getting used to not having Nicholas Petit-Frere out there, not having Olave and Garrett Wilson out there. There were a lot of issues pre-snap throughout the game that sometimes they were not costly, and they were able to get the play off and that kind of thing. And sometimes it seemed like they maybe wanted to change the play and didn't have time to change the play. And then other times it was just like they couldn't even get lined up properly. And it really could have been an issue in this game, because it was a close game, that they had to burn some timeouts very early in both halves.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk almost, the majority of, about the defensive issues, but I think, it definitely, in terms of personnel, now granted, Ohio State knew some of these issues going into it, I think the major highlight we made about knowing, all right, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson are out, knowing that Nicholas Petit-Frere was going to be out. My point about the personnel, I think getting the offensive line established this coming season, because I think that was also played a factor. Now, granted, not so much against Utah's defensive line. I think, in comparison to the Michigan game, C.J. Stroud had plenty of time. But I think you're onto something there when you say that, there were a lot of issues personnel-wise that, impacted, like their clock management. I mean, there was just overall sloppiness throughout that game that fortunately did not come back to truly bite Ohio State.
Yeah, one of those personnel issues happened on defense because I remember Jerron Cage ran all the way off the field, then started to run back onto the field, and they realized they were going to get caught with too many men, and they used a timeout on defense. And that was the one on defense, but there were quite a few of them on offense where it was not clear. And some of these were veteran guys. Like when Jeremy Ruckert doesn't know where to line up, that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, and Jeremy Ruckert, I know exactly because I remember thinking like, okay, and I think before they burned one of those crucial timeouts, I think I can't remember which of the players came up and kind of, like tapped him like on the helmet or on the, on the back or something like, it's okay, man, like kind of like, like kind of, but I completely agree with you that, yeah, and it's like, how is this an issue? I mean, how is this when you come in and, like in terms of, all right, well, this is the down and this is the formation and you should know precisely what your assignment is for that to be an issue to result in a timeout needing to be burned.
Yeah. So the early going, like I said, the Utah had to punt on their first drive. Ohio State went 3 and out. And then Utah took over in pretty good field position and ended up scoring first with Cameron Rising throwing to Britton Covey for 19 yards for the touchdown. Let's get this out of the way now.
I know.
You and I talked about Utah last week, and you hit me with a Britton Covey's going to the NFL, and well, maybe he is, but he didn't opt out of the Rose Bowl game. So he was a factor.
I freely that was my bad. Here was the deal: was obviously I don't follow Britton Covey on Twitter, but somebody had posted it. Somebody else that I follow. I'm not gonna. I will own this mistake, but somebody had posted a screenshot. You know how it is. Like, and the fact that he had declared for the NFL draft, I can't remember who it was, but it was basically with the inference like, oh, Ohio State is dodging a bullet here, thinking like, okay, like I took that as, like the fact that he was declaring for the NFL draft. I didn't read into the tweet itself, him saying like, oh, that I'm going to definitely play in the Rose Bowl. I saw the NFL draft stuff and just based on the associated text with the tweet, led me to thinking he was out. So that was completely my bad. So my apologies to you and to our listeners for misleading, thinking that Britton Covey was out as, let's just say, like future New England Patriot Britton Covey.
Yeah. So the Utah drive did not even make them break a sweat. They 6 plays. They never even got to a third down, and they led 7-0. Ohio State took over. And promptly went 3 and out again. It was not looking good early. It was, I know Kyle Whittingham after the game criticized his kickoff coverage. And, yeah, Ohio State had some decent returns, but the first couple returns were not very good for Ohio State. The first couple were covered very well by Utah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know we're gonna talk about it, but I think I'm sure Ryan Day was like, hey, I'll flip you.
Yeah.
Coverage. If you're really Kyle, if you're really that burnt about it, let's talk about kickoff coverage.
And Ohio State's best one was called back on a hold on the wrong guy. They got the wrong guy. It was G. Scott that actually held, but. Anyway, so it's 7-0 Utah, and the 3 and out for Ohio State on the second drive. Utah comes right back down the field again. Only faces 1 third down on the next drive, and converts a pass from Rising to Bernard for 12-yard touchdown, and it's 14-0. And that's the way the first quarter ended. And I said at the time, yeah, this is pretty much I'm about to opt out of the Rose Bowl at this point.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Ohio State fans were. I mean, this was besides you wanting to opt out. I think the general sentiment on social media by not so much Ohio State fans, but I think by um, like national media personalities are like Ohio State is showing that they really have no interest in being there while Utah is fired up to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's what it looked like.
It did. It was not looking good for Ohio State at that moment.
Yeah. So the first drive, it was Henderson incomplete pass, then short pass to Smith-njigba, shorter pass to Smith-njigba, and incomplete pass. And the third drive, they come out and they get a 9-yard pass on first down, so they're finally ahead of the chains. They get a Henderson run for 4 yards. It's a first down, but no, it's not, because of a holding penalty. And that's when I tweeted, "First downs are stupid. We don't want one of those anyway." And but they were able to finally convert and get a first down and make something happen, and that's good, because honestly, Chip, I don't think that if the offense continued to sort of struggle a little bit, and I don't mean, maybe if they just had an average game even, I don't think Ohio State had any prayer of even getting back into the game defensively. I think the offense sparked the defensive effort in the second half. The offense brought the team to life. The plays that C.J. Stroud and everybody, but especially Jackson Smith-Njigba, were making were just, they weren't even good plays. They were phenomenal plays. Like, he's fitting these passes into these tight windows on the sideline with a well-covered receiver, and guys like Egbuka and Marvin Harrison are pulling them down and getting a foot in bounds and completing passes and picking up first downs on critical plays, and you can't help but feed off of that.
No, I agree. I think when you say that the offense certainly sparked the defense, they were, let's just say it. Like, they were down 14-0. It was looking very, very dire for Ohio State, and then when they finally got points on the board, I think, like you said, it was kind of like, okay, we are not going to go gentle into that good night. Like, we are going to show up with some pride and shut up all the naysayers and the doubters, and they started it right there on that particular drive.
Yeah, so the start of the second quarter, Ohio State finished that next drive with a touchdown pass from Stroud to Marvin Harrison Jr., the first of his 3. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a phenomenal day, and a day that on most other days would have been a standout day. But then you look at what one of the other receivers did, and you go, okay, yeah, so what?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, Marvin Harrison Jr., not that he had a bad freshman year. It was just the fact that when you look at the players that were ahead of him, it was very difficult. Like, when he played, I'm thinking of like when he had opportunities to play earlier in the year. He certainly played well, but he just played sparingly because he's behind Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. For him to have, as you said, it's just because of Jackson Smith-Njigba, like what would have been the story of the Rose Bowl, in any other circumstance. He certainly made a coming out announcement for himself, for the rest of college football. Like, hey, yeah, we're losing Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, but this Marvin Harrison Jr. guy, you might want to keep your eyes and ears open for him starting right now for 2022.
Yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr., this was like his Chris Olave against Michigan game. It was his announcement that next year there's going to be a new sheriff in town, kind of at one of the new starting wide receiver positions. So the Buckeyes pull within 14-7, but they give it right back on the next drive. Again, the Utes don't have a whole lot of trouble getting down the field. They had 1 third down on the next drive. It was a 3rd and 2, and they end up with a tight end around for 7 yards to pick that up. And at the end of it, Tavion Thomas, a 6-yard run, just basically through guys' arms into the end zone. And again, the defense just did not look like, A, they cared, B, they knew anything about how to tackle anyone, or C, had any enthusiasm for why they were even on the field.
I'm going to say D, all of the above.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, that pretty much covers it. It was not great. I believe that was the drive that put the Utah up 21-7, where we lost Jack Sawyer for the game to, once again, everybody's favorite penalty, targeting.
And it was, I mean, let's face it, the unevenness, the irregularity of how it's called. I know that, we'll talk about, like Utah actually had a player disqualified as well. But I mean, if there's one off-season request that I think universally across college football is to come up with some kind of a textbook definition or a modification of this, because I realize you're trying to protect the players, but just the lack of standard about how it's applied and how it's called is just so frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, you got Rising's running down the field at top speed. Sawyer's chasing him from behind. When he goes into his tackle attempt, he doesn't know where the head of the quarterback's going to be. Yes, he's responsible for keeping his head up as much as he can, as much as a large human being can while they're lowering themselves to make a tackle. And I still maintain that it was the right side of his helmet that hit the, sort of a glancing hit on Rising's helmet. And, once Rising is basically a running back, he's no longer a defenseless player. So he doesn't get the same protections. I just think it's a very subjective call. If you want to call it, call it. But throw away the ejection, because that way, at least if you've made a bad call, you don't cost the kid the rest of the game.
I know you're the soccer aficionado, so I to me what I think is, I understand you want to apply a penalty, so I would be in favor of something comparable to what they do in soccer with like the yellow card, red card type of a thing. You could still assess it as a 15-yard personal foul, even though that can be a painful thing.
Yeah.
But that might be the incentive that the player, and I'm not taking shots at Jack Sawyer, because I thought that was, I agree with everything you said momentarily a few moments ago, is I think that might be enough to kind of get the player to kind of reassess their technique, in subsequent plays. But like I said a few moments ago, I think they just need to reevaluate how it's being called, because it's just, you just see these in other circumstances where it certainly seems a lot more crystal clear targeting, and it's not called at all.
Yeah. So it's 21-7 Utes at this point. They kick off. Good return for Egbuka. Gets it out to the 40-yard line. Only takes Ohio State 2 plays to get that touchdown back. Mayan Williams runs for 10 yards. And then the first real lightning strike of the day, the 50-yarder to Smith-Njigba from Stroud. And this was a play where I was so impressed with Jackson Smith-Njigba. The last 15 yards of that catch and run, he was holding off a guy with the stiff arm of justice. The stiff arm of justice is a thing of beauty, and we always support the stiff arm of justice.
Exactly. I mean, this was, I guess, like, this was the first indication that the defensive strategy of Citro and Minnich was not being applied, in terms of the fact that he was able to go the distance as he did. That, okay, he was certainly in line for a lot of big plays, and this was just one of them.
Unbelievable play. And that's really where the clouds started to part, and things really got easy for the Ohio State offense from that point on. I mean, it wasn't a 100%, score on every drive, score a touchdown on every drive, but from that point forward, Ohio State you never thought that Utah could stop them from that point on.
Right. I mean, this is kind of where the idea of this is going to be a shootout game. This is not going to be, as much as I was going into it kind of with the thought that, okay, Utah was the better team defensively. This was kind of the first indication of maybe I overestimated Utah's capacity to slow down Ohio State's passing game.
Yes, exactly. And it's 21-14. You're thinking, hey, this defense could just get some stops. This is a game that's utterly winnable at this point. And then it turned out that you didn't even need the defense to get a stop because the special teams couldn't get a stop. Because as it happens, this is an Ohio State team that just can't seem to find a kid with a strong enough leg to kick the ball out of the back of the end zone when you have a dangerous return man like Britton Covey. And maybe there's also some arrogance in saying we don't care if he's good, we're better and we can take him.
I want to believe that it's more the former than the latter. I certainly hope so because, man, you want to talk about some arrogance, from Ohio State. If that's the case, that's not an issue. I would certainly hope that one of the off-season remedies of Ryan Day is about, okay, we need to find somebody on this massive campus of ours who has a strong enough leg that will just boom it out of the end zone and make it impossible for anyone to return.
Yeah.
Period. I don't care about, it's like as long as it doesn't go out of bounds. As long as,
we did that too.
I know we did. Yeah. But I'm just saying is like, okay, I want, I don't care, what it looks like as long as it's unreturnable because it's been blasted so far over their head that they're just going to start on the 25 period.
Yeah,
I don't care who it is.
So Covey takes the kickoff after the big play by Jackson Smith-Njigba. He takes it to the house. 97 yards for the touchdown. The best opportunity to tackle him came from Lathan Ransom, who not only missed the tackle, but in so doing, whipped his leg around and hit one of his teammates. And then the next thing you know, Lathan Ransom's being put in an air cast and being carted off the field. And so that adds literal injury to insult. And it's 28-14, and now you've lost one of your defensive backs and a special teams player.
And I guess the one thing that I'm going to take positive solace in is that as of today, I saw a tweet from Lathan Ransom that his surgery went well. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you want to talk, like you said, you lost one of your better players, not only on special teams, a defensive contributor. You can only speculate that he's certainly going to be missing all of spring, during this vital time.
Right.
Jim Knowles is coming in, implementing a new defense. So certainly best wishes to Lathan Ransom for a speedy recovery, and looking forward to seeing him get back on the field for Ohio State in 2022.
Yeah, and if you were one of those chuckleheads who says, Olave and Garrett Wilson should play, they're being prima donnas and blah, blah, blah. This game is a perfect example of why, if you're a first-round pick, you opt out of a meaningless exhibition game.
Well, no, I think the problem with you, Michael, is that the kids don't the kids don't love football like they used to.
Yeah.
According to the guy who makes several million while being jetted in a private jet to and from like his game day assignments. I think that it was bad enough that Kirk Herbstreit said that in the first place. When he tried to clean it up, it was kind of like rubbing mud, or I'll use another thing that's dark, rubbing that all over the window and making it look worse. It was he should have never opened his mouth. I understand, there's a lot of frustration for people that players are opting out. I'm with you. Okay, this is not our decision to make. I fully respect any and every player, regardless of whether they're for Ohio State or any other team, opting out of if they believe that this is in their best interest. So, like I said, I think any individual who decides to start kind of pontificating about what other people should do when it has no impact on them personally, I think you should kind of stop and reassess before you speak up.
My mom had a saying, and I think it went something like, "Mind your own business."
There you go. Your mom's a very wise person.
It's
good advice.
My uncle was texting me at the beginning of the game and wishing me well, and at that point I had already kind of given up Ohio State for dead because I think it was 14-0 already. And we talked, he was like, well, why do you, I said something about predicting that Utah would win. And, well, why would you do that? And I said, well, I just didn't think that the team would be up for this game. Well, why would you think that? He's not a college football guy. He watches pro.
Okay.
And I talked about the reasons that we gave here. Like, and part of it was the players that opted out. And he started in on if I were an NFL scout, I wouldn't draft any of these prima donnas. Like, well, you wouldn't be a very good NFL scout, first of all.
Yeah.
But, I'm saying, look, these kids, it's easy for us to sit here and say, oh, I would play because, I have, loyalty to my teammates. Those teammates, if they were first round picks coming out, would be doing the same thing. And not everybody does it. But let's say you have a winning lottery ticket and there's a 5 or 10% chance that winning lottery ticket might disappear on you.
Right.
There's no guarantees. Would you take those odds? I mean, you know you have the winning lottery ticket. You know it's in your hand. You know you have it. Why would you risk it?
Exactly.
Some people are willing to do that. Some are not. And I'm not going to criticize them. I don't know what I would do. I've never been in that situation, and I don't know what I would do. I'm rather conservative, though. I think I probably would opt out.
I would, too. I mean, and if it was, if that was my son, that would be my recommendation as well. I mean, it was... Yeah.
And their teammates don't feel like they're quitting on them. That's the thing. Is like, they're quitting on their team. Their teammates are supportive of them. They're like, hey, go get that money. You see them tweeting that stuff. You see it. It's not like we're speculating on that. And it's just this certain mindset that people have that these people owe you something. They don't owe you anything. This is their life, and they can make whatever choice they want to, and it has nothing to do with you. And I don't think it makes him selfish, and also I don't think any NFL scout that's saying, hey, he's putting his NFL career ahead of his, this meaningless exhibition, so I'm not going to draft him. No one's doing that. So so anyway, I explained it, and I thought I was polite in my response and tried to be, I tried to word it in a way that I'm trying to say, look at it from his perspective. This is what these guys are thinking. And he hits me with a text back, whatever. And that, I was so pissed. I was like,
so you're already in a bad mood,
yeah,
and then you got that.
You don't get to whatever me when I just tell you, that you're being an old fuddy-duddy, basically, but in a nice way. But anyway, yeah. So if you look at this game, look at how many guys were hurt, how many guys were down for extended period of time. Look what happened to Matt Corral from Mississippi
that night.
Yeah, I mean he might go in the top, 6?
Possibly. I mean, now that's
not going to happen now.
Yeah, I mean, like from all the indications are that it was not, anything that it was a, like his ankle was injured, but nothing that, like that is going to knock him potentially out of the combine or anything like that. But yeah I mean, it could certainly impact his draft position for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you see a guy who leaves the game like that on crutches, and again, because of we have this college football playoff now, and it really hammers home the fact that all of these bowl games, they don't really mean a whole lot, Chip, if you think about it.
No, they don't, and that's why, not to take us into a completely different tangent. That's why this idea of with the playoff expansion and the bowls saying, well, we want it to be the bowl games to be, like the second round, or it's like, stop. Guys, I don't know how to tell you this, but fans, as you could see, now Utah, obviously was the exception to this. The Rose Bowl is a classic venue, but you could see on any of the other exhibition games, as you accurately call them, I mean, hardly anyone goes. Nobody, I mean, like that's the reality is, like that's why the hypocrisy of Herb Street, and Desmond Howard, about calling people out. It's like your network bought up all of these exhibition bowl games, but you spend all of your time hyping up the college football playoff. And the bowls, as much as you want them to continue, the reality is that when the college football playoff does expand, and I don't know what the number is going to be. I think like the number 8 sounds like, or seems to be gaining more and more traction than the original proposed 12. Anyway, whenever it does expand, the bowl games, there are going to be bowl games that are going to be casualties of it, because the reality is that, the fans, that's where they want to see is they want their team to be in the playoff, and they want to follow that game, the playoff games, and they should be on college football campuses. And I think that's the direction that hopefully it will take.
Yeah. The bowl game structure as we knew it is dead.
Oh yeah.
It's not what it once was, and that's just, things have, like they say, to everything, there is a season, and Bulls, their season's coming to a close. We all liked Blockbuster, but you're not seeing a whole lot of Blockbusters on every corner anymore,
unless we're watching Captain Marvel. But
yeah,
that's a different story.
All right, so it's 28-14 after the kickoff return. And the defense is going, so we get a little bit of a rest, right?
Right. Exactly.
We're going to get a little rest. The offense is going to go back out there and keep the ball. No, this was another big play for the Buckeyes. They had 1st and 10 at their 48 to start the drive. C.J. Stroud to Jackson Smith-Njigba for 52 yards, touchdown, 28-21. So the defense doesn't even get a rest.
I said it a few minutes ago, is that we're in a shootout. I mean, let's face it. I mean, it was just kind of like any hope of this being, all right, we're going to be able to just kind of slow this game down, wasn't happening.
Yeah, exactly. Utah did not have any trouble getting that score right back. Game right back down and made it 35-21. Rising with a 62-yard run on a 4th and 1 play that should have gained a maximum of 2 yards.
That was where you want to talk about just the social media eruption of Ohio State fans. I thought I saw something about Ryan Day should fire all the coaches at halftime and make them walk home. Like those kind of that was the general sentiment at that point.
I have a hard time blaming them. I mean, Taraja Mitchell had his arms around Cameron Rising. I understand Cameron Rising is a strong young man who lifts weights. You still expect an Ohio State linebacker with 2 hands on the quarterback to pull him down.
Oh, certainly. I mean, like I said, that was not a moment that the Ohio State defense they were not cloaked in glory, put it that way. Like as a unit, that entire just that whole sequence of events, that's going to be something that I'm sure Jim Knowles is going to just probably do a double take when he's reviewing that game film, trying to figure out, how did that come to pass?
Yeah, Ohio State took over, tried to get that score right back, and would have if Mr. Smith-Njigba had just looked at the scoreboard while he was being chased down from behind. Because he got inside the 10 on another long pass for 50 yards, and the ball was knocked out of his hands into the end zone, recovered by Utah. And that's when it felt like, they broke serve. It's over.
That was kind of like, again, like the curse of Clark Phillips was, like on full display. I mean, like credit to him for heady defensive play. Like you said, it's like, Jackson Smith-Njigba, had already established, like he was having a great game. But yeah, like to lose that fumble, something that, could have truly helped Ohio State at that point. It did certainly feel like, oh man, this might be one of these moments where when it's all said and done, Ohio State's going to look back and this is going to be one of those big moments of regret.
Yeah. I really need to I need to read and become more of a recruiting guy, at least a little more knowledgeable about it, because it really bothered me during the telecast that they kept framing this like Clark Phillips was getting some kind of revenge on Ohio State. He had an offer. He was committed. He chose not to come to Ohio State.
Right. From every indication that I had, and I'm certainly not trying to dissuade you from following recruiting if that is one of your new passions, is that it sounded to me from everything that I read at the time and that I recall was he actually decided to change his mind about Ohio State when Jeff Hafley left to go to Boston College, meaning that, all right, the coach who kind of cultivated the relationship, and I understand, again, it sounds like, like the old school we were just talking about, like the people complaining about players opting out. The old adage of, you don't choose a school because of a coach. Yeah, I'm sure you don't. Say that to go tell that to Caleb Williams, who and announced that like he's leaving Oklahoma to enter the transfer portal. He's not even giving the new coaching staff at Oklahoma. I should say he's not, but chances are that much of an opportunity because Lincoln Riley left. Getting back to Clark Phillips, hey, he saw the opportunity to play for, who has proven to be a stellar defensive coach while at Boston College. He saw that change. He didn't know who they were going to bring in, and so he took an opportunity to be closer to home and play for Utah, and obviously demonstrated very well against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl.
Right. And I don't blame him. If the guy who recruits you got a relationship with, leaves, I think it's fine to look around and see what else is there. Maybe you had a close runner-up and you're like, well, he's not going to be there, so I'll go to this the second choice. It's like, when you go to a restaurant and they're like, well, we're out of this. You go to your second choice.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes like you're not happy about it.
Yeah.
I mean, but you make the best of what you consider. Okay, I don't want to call it a bad situation, but the best of the situation at that moment.
Right. But they also framed the Tavion Thomas thing as a revenge game, and I thought that he had an offer, and then the class filled up. But I might be remembering that wrong.
From what I read in the days leading up to it, that his offer was conditional upon him going to a community college because his grades were not I don't want to say that they were bad, but there was concern about admission standards at Ohio State. So when offered that, he said absolutely not. Went to Cincinnati, and then, as it turns out, left Cincinnati, and lo and behold, wound up at a community college before transferring to Utah. So they were trying to stoke the fires of revenge, but when the reality is, it was, like Tavion Thomas, he could have been at Ohio State if he had done what the coaching staff, I think Urban Meyer, that was the condition placed upon it. He just didn't want to do that. Right.
And a thing that he ended up doing anyway. But you did see that kind of play from him where he would run off. He'd run through Ronnie Hickman's arms, and then he'd get tackled later, and he'd get up and strut. And, it's like, okay, everybody kind of does that when they make a play, but seemed like there was a little extra in it from him.
Yeah, I think there's always, I mean, we've talked about this, not necessarily about Utah, but anytime that there's an Ohio player that if they didn't get recruited by Ohio State, or the circumstances like I just described about Tavion Tom, that there's, kind of like that extra, the extra angle, the extra juice, like, oh, let's, try and make this out of, into more of a revenge factor than maybe than it really is.
It wasn't like that, but yeah, they made it sound like that. It wasn't that Ohio State didn't turn its back on either of those players. So that kind of bothered me a little bit, but it is what it is. There was no more scoring in the half. The half ended with a 2-touchdown Utah lead, 35-21. And, you could point to that fumble and to that kickoff return and go, if not for that, this game looks a little bit different at halftime.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly, like I said, the special teams, the defense, the fumble, I mean, there were just a lot of things that needed to be addressed and cleaned up at the half.
Yeah, it did not seem likely that Ohio State's defense would suddenly start playing better. Even at you make some halftime adjustments, maybe you could take something away that's been working for Utah, but everything was working for Utah. What one thing would you take away?
Nothing. It couldn't have been going. I mean, the one thing you would obviously have changed was the defensive strategy against Jackson Smith-Njigba. But
yeah.
Other than that, no. Like they had everything going the way that they wanted.
Yeah.
In terms of obviously, capitalizing on Ohio State's mistakes on special teams, taking advantage of them, Ohio State's defense. It was looking really good for Utah at the half.
It really was because, I would think that they would have gone into the locker rooms and, like I said, everything Utah did offensively worked. So I didn't know if there was any defensive adjustment you could make other than just say, guys, can you play better? And on the other side of the ball, I thought, well, if Utah just makes some kind of adjustment on Smith-njigba, they're really going to cripple what Ohio State's doing. But they came out in the second half, and Ohio State came out with the ball. Of course, because they had the ball to start the second half. They came right down the field. It looked like things were going to go well. And then C.J. Stroud tried a little pump fake, a little double move, and then he left his pass too far inside, and Clark Phillips picked it off in the end zone.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely all on C.J. Stroud. That was that, as brilliantly as he played, that was definitely a moment where I'm sure Ryan Day, when they are reviewing the game film, would be like, okay, that, it wasn't there. You forced. That was an uncharacteristic CJ. Like we talked. We've completely forgotten that. He was. Starting. As a redshirt freshman.
Mm-hmm.
At the conclusion of a terrific redshirt freshman year. But that was the kind of mistake that you would have possibly had seen in the first few games of the season, and not necessarily in the Rose Bowl. I think, that one is certainly one that he wanted back.
Yeah, and it wasn't even as if he were throwing that to, Marvin Harrison, a much bigger receiver, or Jackson Smith-Njigba, who has, obviously has earned his trust, earned the trust of everyone. He was trying to throw it to Julian Fleming, and he might have gotten away with it had he thrown it over the outside shoulder, but he left the pass inside, and Phillips picked it off. Luckily, that didn't end up hurting Ohio State because Utah actually went 3-and-out. And at the end of the 3-and-out, their punter fumbled the football, and I still don't really know who recovered, but it didn't really matter. And the way the two guys were fighting over the ball was kind of silly because regardless of who recovered it, it was a dead ball at that spot in Ohio State's ball.
I was wondering the same thing. I was like, okay, I don't know why there was like such a huge scrum over this because it was a change of possession. I would remember thinking like, okay, I don't know why this is like turning into like a thing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I appreciate the effort and the intensity, but hey, it's Ohio State's ball. Doesn't matter.
Officially Bryson Shaw with the recovery.
Okay.
So there you go. Not that it mattered, again, because whoever picked it up, it was dead at that spot. So Ohio State gets a second bite at the apple and promptly takes a holding penalty on DeJuan Jones. A very odd play. Mayan Williams with a no-gain run on first down. DeJuan Jones gets a holding penalty. But I watched this again last night, Chip. The point of attack had a gaping hole, and Mayan Williams bounced the play outside. And that's what actually caused DeJuan Jones to hold his man, because his man suddenly changed directions on him, and he was like, oh, I better hold on. My guy's going that way. So I don't understand what Mayan Williams was seeing, because they had a very good camera view on the replay, and I'm looking at that thinking, how are you a running back and turning down that gap?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Mayan Williams, that will be when Tony Alford is sitting in the running back room, like, what were you doing? Like it was right there. Like you said, the camera angles certainly showed that the hole was there for him instead of bouncing out.
Well, I think Tony Alford must have seen the hole, because Travion Henderson was in on the next play and ran it for 13 yards. And that set up a 2nd and 7, and Stroud hits Marvin Harrison in the back of the end zone for the touchdown, and Ohio State back within a touchdown, Chip.
Yes, and Marvin Harrison, as we said earlier, he's definitely demonstrating, okay, he is going to be a player to be reckoned with, starting now in 2022. Just because other players have moved on, Ohio State has definitely reloaded well at that wide receiver position.
Yeah, but we can't have nice things, Chip, because Utah came down and scored again, but this time settling for a field goal, a short field goal, but a field goal nonetheless, as Ohio State finally gets a third down stop in the red zone, stopping a Thomas run for 2 yards on an odd call on 3rd and 7, actually. But they kicked the field goal, and it's 38-28, but you're thinking, hey, if we get the touchdown now, we put a little pressure on Utah.
And earlier you talked about, kind of like the Ohio State arrogance of kicking off to Britton Covey, like, oh, we can stop this guy. There might have been a flip of that, like the Utah arrogance, like, okay, like you said, on 3rd and 7, we can run on these guys. They're not that, and that now granted, they still came away with points, but I think that was kind of, again, like the small little victories that you started to see accumulate in the second half by the Ohio State defense. That was one of them.
Yeah. So Ohio State went down the field, and then just kind of a weird sequence when they got in the red zone in terms of play calling. And on the first down, I think was the down where Stroud threw it into traffic and almost got it picked off, and it was knocked down. And he had guys underneath twice on that drive and didn't hit them, and they had to settle for a field goal, and so you're back within a touchdown at 38-31.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about, like when he was almost intercepted in the end zone, and I think Mitch Rossi was right in front of him.
Yeah.
He could have hit Mitch Rossi. Now, granted, we'll talk about Mitch Rossi later. He may not have scored a touchdown, but at least that would have been positive yardage, and it wouldn't have been a fortunate. Ohio State was fortunate that it didn't result in a turnover.
Right, and there was, I think, there were 2 plays that were incomplete in that sequence that he had guys that if he just takes the underneath guy, he's going to get 4 or 5 yards, and that changes your play call for the next down. Or if you do it twice, you got a first down. So, but anyway, they are back within 1 score, and that's pretty good. Because you're just looking for that one stop, and the defense had been looking a little better in the second half, but really the next drive for Utah kind of changed things and really made you believe that Ohio State could win the game, because that was when Cameron Rising got hurt.
And that was, I'm glad that it seemed like he was able to walk off the field under, like on his own power, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I can only speculate that, maybe it was just the head hitting the turf, like he got knocked out from just like the sheer weight, of players landing on him, because it didn't look like, you know what I mean? I'm not saying anything against him. It didn't look like he was hit especially hard, but it just looked to me like the weight of the players, the way he landed, that his head bounced off the turf. And that's
he was trying to throw the ball away, and he was kind of airborne when he was trying to throw the ball away. So he had no protection because his arm was up, and he just came down on his back, and his head whipped back and hit the ground. But I did misspeak, because that was the next drive. That drive was the drive that Ohio State actually got to stop on 4th down, and I'm still not sure why Utah turned down a field goal there, but they were driving and they had a 4th down and short, and Ronnie Hickman actually came up and made a nice tackle right before the sticks to prevent a first down there, and that was a case where, and I, Twitter arguments are what they are, but somebody was giving me grief because I said, I don't understand why you just don't take the points there and go up 2 scores again. And somebody was like, well, maybe they thought that Utah thought they couldn't stop Ohio State's offense. Well, that's why you want a 2-score lead, right?
Exactly. Or like you said, Twitter arguments are often pointless. I was surprised that they went for it as well. I'm say what you will, I know Tom Orr, is so much against kicking field goals and like going for it and all that. Mm-hmm. But at some point, I'm of the mindset like, hey, if I can get points and come away, with, like you said, like increasing the lead, I'm going to do that versus coming away with nothing, which is what Utah resulted in.
Yeah, and I get it. I do like going for it more often than not, depending on the situation. But here's a situation where it's almost the end of the third quarter. You've been leading the whole game. You have a one-score lead. A field goal makes it a two-score lead. They can't possibly catch you unless they break your serve at some point down the future, and probably twice. So why not take the two-score lead and try to start working clock? And if you get a stop, then you basically have won the game right there.
Exactly.
But that didn't happen, and Ohio State did, in fact, come down and tie the game. So, again, bad decision by Kyle Whittingham.
Yeah, precisely. The bad decision, it resulted in now Ohio State and Utah are tied, and there had to be some anxious moments, within the Utah fan base at this point.
Yeah, another big drive, another big catch and run for Smith-njigba, 30-yarder on this one. Mitch Rossi had the 22-yard reception on this drive. You mentioned we were going to talk about him again. There he was. And a couple of Travion Henderson runs, and then a great route by Marvin Harrison for a 5-yard touchdown as he turned his man inside, went outside, and a perfect pass, got his foot in. And Marvin Harrison just showing all of his skills in this game.
Said it before, said it again. If anything, if there was concern about the loss of Olave and Wilson, I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr., I think, put any concern that Ohio State fans may have for the upcoming season, he certainly put those to bed, with his performance, and that touchdown, like you said, was clutch at much needed time.
Yeah. So the next drive, once it was tied, that's when Rising got hurt. He was sacked by Court Williams. He hit his head on the ground. He had to come out. And then they put in Barnes, the backup, and I keep wanting to call him Bucky Barnes. It's not He's not the Winter Soldier.
He's not the Winter Soldier.
He's not the Winter Soldier. All they did was run the ball a couple times and punt, and that allowed Ohio State to take its first lead of the game. As in a day full of insane passes and catches, the most insane pass and catch to Smith-njigba, a 30-yard touchdown. I don't know how C.J. Stroud fit the ball in there. He was extremely well covered. And then I don't understand how Jackson Smith-njigba caught the ball over his shoulder and got a foot down in bounds.
Well, we're a family show, so I'm not going to repeat what Coach Day said.
But yes.
I'm sure you've seen it, and again, not that I consider, like lip reading one of my skills or talents, but, I certainly respect and appreciated the sentiment because I couldn't believe that he came. I mean, that was, again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Jackson Smith-njigba, Ohio State fans can relax. He's got another year, but that's going to be when Jackson Smith-njigba eventually declares for the NFL draft. That will be one of those highlight films that they show during his NFL draft presentation because that was amazing.
Mm-hmm. And he's going to get coached up to get that second foot down.
Yes,
because that's what you got to do on Sundays. So Ohio State has fought all day long, Chip. They finally have the lead, and we're inside the last half of a quarter, and Utah is sitting there with their backup walk-on quarterback in, and things are starting to look pretty good.
Well, it's also because, as you said, when you're looking at Utah, the fact that, all right, they had to go to Barnes, a walk-on, to take Rising's place. Ohio State probably thought, all right, we can, I don't want to say take our foot off the gas, but, I think that they kind of felt more comfortable crowding the line of scrimmage against Barnes.
Yeah. So, and it looked like it might be a very short drive as a couple of short Thomas runs set up a 3rd and 6, and Ohio State stopped the 3rd and 6, but little pass interference on Cam Brown. Yeah, you could call it, but with some of the stuff that wasn't getting called, maybe not the best time for the refs to say, hey, we're still on the field.
Yeah, it was definitely, like you said, it's like you kind of wonder, was really pass interference, but I mean, it certainly seemed kind of like a judgment call to me.
Yeah, it was. He got his arm on the hip as Covey turned outside, but he didn't really slow him down. It wasn't really. I didn't think it impacted whether he had a chance to catch the ball or not, and clearly the referees did. It didn't look like it slowed Covey down at all, but that gave the Utes new life. And after another minuscule run by Thomas, Barnes started to heat up. He hit Covey for 8 yards, then he ran for 10 yards, and then, oh my goodness, Ronnie Hickman, what were you doing at the end of this drive?
Oh yeah, I mean, Ronnie Hickman. I mean, of all times for him to kind of, I don't want to say like play too physical, but it was certainly the timing could not have been worse from an Ohio State perspective.
I mean, he got burned badly in coverage by the tight end. He tried to make up the ground. The ball was underthrown, so he runs into the tight end, and he gets the big pass interference, gives him first down. And on the very next play, Barnes just throws a moon ball to the back of the end zone, and Hickman gets it completely just blown past by the tight end again, who does a nice job, catches it, gets a foot in, and now we're tied at 45 with just under 2 minutes to play.
And here is where the ghost of Joe Germain started to kind of, I felt like, okay, like I'm thinking like this. I said to my family as we were watching, I said, there's plenty of time for Ohio State to score. I mean, yeah. I never ever thought, especially after the performance of C.J. Stroud, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., that, okay, there's enough time. What was going to happen, I didn't know, but I certainly did not feel like Ohio State was in a difficult position, time-wise, in order to put points on the board.
Right. They weren't in bad shape. They had almost 2 minutes. They had a timeout left. They had moved the ball well. And I will say that the fact that the game was tied, I wasn't overly concerned that they would lose the game in regulation. I thought at worst, this looks like an overtime game. But the last time I was that sure Ohio State would score on a late drive in a bowl game was when Ohio State threw an interception that was intended for Chris Olave against Clemson.
Well, that's a good point. Like I said, I guess I was a little bit more optimistic just based on everything, as I said, like Jackson Smith-Njigba, C.J. Stroud, like the big plays that they were having. And I just thought, okay, they're going to be able to get down the field and put themselves in a position to score.
And they did, and they didn't even really struggle to do it. It was another good kickoff return out to the 42. Stroud hits Smith-Njigba for 8 yards. Henderson runs for 6. Stroud throws it to Henderson for 9. Henderson runs for 12. So they're still running the football. And they get down inside the 12. They get to the 12-yard line or the 11-yard line, and there's still half a minute to play. And then they give the ball to Henderson, and he runs for 9 yards down to the 2-yard line. It's second down and 1. And instead of running up and clocking it and maybe trying to score a touchdown with, still knowing you've got a timeout, here's where things got bizarre for me. Okay, so they let the clock run down to 12 seconds. I don't understand that number. And then they call their timeout to kick their field goal. Now, the stupid thing about 12 seconds, Chip, is this. If, let's say there's a bad snap on second down, if you recover that ball, you're not getting out of bounds, so the game's going to end anyway. So why are you not running that down for your field goal kicker? Why don't you run that down to 3 seconds?
I was wondering what the logic was on that as well, because I was sitting there for all the reasons you just said, and the fact that, okay, Ohio State scores as they did. Now you've given them time.
Yeah.
You've given them time on the clock. Like, why wouldn't you want to go all the way down, like you said, call the timeout, then try the field goal with no time remaining? I didn't get it either.
If you're kicking the field goal, if that's what you're going to do, and I don't necessarily think you ever should leave it to your kicker if you don't have to, but let's say you're going to that's the route you're going to go. And Ohio State has a good kicker, and it was a chip shot, so I understand the thinking. I just don't understand not making it so that that kick is the last thing that occurs in this game. Win, lose, if he makes it or not doesn't matter. You're either winning the game or it's going into overtime.
There must have been some kind of, maybe because of the angle, that they thought that was better for Noah Ruggles. I don't know. I agree with everything you've said. That I think it certainly seemed like that was kind of a puzzling example of clock management right there.
Yeah. So what I'm doing in this situation, I'm not the coach, but if I'm doing is it's 2nd and 1. I'm running everybody up the line of scrimmage. I am clocking the ball. Okay. So you still got your timeout. You got a 2nd and 1 from the 2-yard line. Then I'm going to give it to Travion Henderson. And if he's probably going to score, and we're going to win the game by a touchdown. And if he doesn't, we call timeout, and with 3 seconds left, and we kick the field goal then. And instead, the decision was field goal all the way, but it was a really bizarre thing to leave that much time on the clock to take your field goal and leave that time on the clock, because you know that 12 seconds is too much time. You're going to kick the field goal. It's going to take about 3 seconds, which is what it took. Ruggles puts the team ahead, 48-45. You got 9 seconds left on the clock, and now you're kicking off to a guy who's already run one back all the way for a touchdown, and you decide to kick it to him anyway.
That, I couldn't believe that. I mean, even Chris Fowler couldn't believe that on the telecast. They're not going to kick it to him again, are they?
No.
Something like that. So the mere fact that it didn't wind up hurting Ohio State is fortuitous, but that last sequence of time, the clock management, all of that, I just, that would be the one thing that I guess just kind of, it sounds like sour grapes on my part. But what are you doing?
No, the end game made no sense. It was bananas insane.
It was.
From every logical, by the book coaching maneuver would say, take it down to 2 or 3 seconds, call your timeout, kick your field goal, and as long as it's not blocked and scooped and scored, you've either won the game or you're going to overtime. There's no chance for Utah to come back. And then to kick it to Britton Covey was just the most insane decision I've ever seen.
Yeah, I just I think special teams is going to be one of those, on the to-do list for 2022. I'm not trying to imply anything about Parker Fleming, but I definitely think that there's going to be some adjustment in terms of strategy, in terms of how things are handled. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't get over it. I was like, and even throughout the game, when they tried to kick it to the short man, they were leaving it hanging too long, and Covey was running up and catching it anyway.
Right.
So they just never had any answer. I'm just thinking, look, at this point, just kick it to the freaking moon, and I don't even care if it only goes 35 yards. They're going to be fair catching it, or you're going to catch it for them.
Right. Exactly.
So, anyway, they did get away with it. Covey escaped for a minute out the left side, and it looked like he was going to be able to pitch the ball, but he was taken down before he could get rid of it, and the game was over. And Ohio State came out with an insane 48-45 win that neither of us predicted. No. And when you look at the numbers, it just seems like, am I looking at season totals or single game individual totals? Because, geez, I mean, first of all, a bowl record for any bowl ever by Jackson Smith-Njigba, with 347 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. He was targeted 16 times and caught 15 passes. So he set the record, single game record for receptions, single game school record for yards, all bowl game records for yards, not just the Rose Bowl, but any bowl game. That number just it defies logic.
Well, I mean, I agree with everything about what you just said, that it defies logic, and the fact that he was left off the Biletnikoff list. like the just how incredible that is, like the performance that he had this year, and he was left off the Bolitnikoff list. Just absolutely amazing.
You could make a very easy case that the third best Ohio State wide receiver made the Bolitnikoff final list, and the two top ones did not.
There you go, right there.
Then you look at C.J. Stroud, who threw for officially 573 yards. They were reporting 574 on game day, on the day of the game, but it got adjusted at some point. 37 of 46, one interception, was not sacked. He was hurried a few times. Threw for 6 touchdowns. So Rose Bowl record for yards, Rose Bowl record for touchdown passes. I think that ties the Ohio State record for single-game touchdown passes. It's a single-game Ohio State record for yards, and the fourth best passing day of any quarterback ever?
Yes.
Hey, Chip, did you know that there were people who thought C.J. Stroud should not start for Ohio State this year?
I was going to say they've become very, very silent, understandably so, over the last portion of the year after, like his issues earlier in the year. I mean, he certainly has justified Ryan Day's faith and commitment in him by the performance that we saw in the Rose Bowl, as well as other games.
Even when he was playing with the sore shoulder and was just getting his feet wet in his first couple starts, he still looked like he had it to me. He still looked like this is going to be a good quarterback. But this is what it looks like when you get a freshman quarterback in his first few starts, especially when one of them's on the road. And as soon as he got that week off and got healed up, I mean, I don't think that anybody, there can't be one single human being now that even Kyle McCord doesn't think Kyle McCord should be starting.
Yeah, I think if anything, I'm sure C.J. Stroud is going to welcome the offseason just for the simple fact of being able to truly strengthen and rehabilitate any lingering issues he may have with that shoulder. But I have no doubt in my mind, my early 2022 spring game prediction is that C.J. Stroud's going to get a quick hook by the coaching staff, and we'll see a heck of a lot more of Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. No sense in exposing C.J. Stroud to potential injury or any other kind of issues unnecessarily.
Yeah. So we talked about Smith-Njigba. Marvin Harrison had 6 catches on 8 targets. He got 71 yards and 3 touchdowns. Huge day for the freshman. It's not like this is something we saw coming. Like you said, these freshmen have played a few snaps here and there in games, but largely late in games, and it's either been where Stroud has been behind backup linemen and not really had much time to throw them the ball, or they've not, they've had the backup quarterbacks in. So they haven't really had a chance to really shine or do much. There was no way to know that this was coming. We knew the talent was there.
Oh, the talent was definitely there. That's the thing. It's like, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, and I don't mean to just because he wasn't a contributor. Jaden Ballard, all highly touted. I think the opportunity was just wasn't there. And now with the departures of Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, we're going to see what these young guys can do, and Marvin Harrison Jr. especially. And Emeka Egbuka more so on the returns. We saw glimpses of what's in store for Ohio State in 2022.
A quietly good day for Julian Fleming. He was targeted 6 times, caught 5 passes for 35 yards. The one that he didn't catch was the interception. Travion Henderson with 4 catches for 27. Egbuka was thrown to 3 times, made all 3 catches for 46 yards. He's going to be a pretty strong receiver for this team. Another quiet day for Jeremy Ruckert, and he had a drop. So out of his 5 targets, 3 catches for 25 yards. Really strange the way he disappeared down the stretch of this season.
Yeah, I guess I thought he would, play a bigger part.
Yeah, you had Ruckert as your pick to click. He did not click. And I had Travion Henderson. Henderson, okay in the pass game. Running the football, He did end up with 83 yards rushing. I'm going to go ahead and give him a click.
Okay.
For combined rushing and receiving, I thought he did overall pretty well. He ran the ball much better in the second half once Ohio State made some adjustments.
I agree. I'm sorry. I've got a cough.
That's okay. That's okay. I should have intuited that. See, this is why we should go back to using the video so we can see each other. But so I will give him the click. Then on defense, you had Ronnie Hickman, and I can't give Ronnie Hickman a click because of the absolute botching of that last Utah drive that allowed the walk-on quarterback to come out and tie the game. Just throwing these high balls that really, if you had any kind of decent coverage at all, you're going to intercept them. But you can't be getting burned by the tight end like that.
I agree.
So Ronnie ended up with only 3 tackles in this game too. So it's everybody will remember him stopping the 4th down play, which was a big play in this game. But overall, just not what you would expect from him. I had Steele Chambers. Chambers only made. Well, he ended up with 5 tackles, but I mean, he didn't really do a lot for me. I think a lot of his tackles were like 5 or 6 yards down the field. I'm not going to give him a click. I will say one guy who got picked on early by Twitter at least because he gave up a touchdown on just an unbelievable catch in the back of the end zone is Tommy Eichenberg. Tommy Eichenberg was great in this game.
Yeah, I was happy for him. Truly, I think he wound up with 11 solo tackles, 6 assists, so 17 overall. Definitely Tommy Eichenberg was the target of a lot of Ohio State fans throughout the season. I thought he certainly played one of his best, if not the best game of this past season.
Yeah, somebody on Twitter said, as soon as I saw 35 in coverage, I knew it was a touchdown. Yeah, but it took a freaking brilliant play to make that catch. The coverage wasn't bad. He went out and took the guy, and the guy made a play. Sometimes you got to tip your cap to the opposition because they can make plays too. They're on scholarship. Eichenberg with a big day, 17 tackles. He had a tackle for loss. It's in as much as anybody had a good day, Tommy Eichenberg had a good day.
Yeah, he definitely, like I said, he had a nose for the football in this game.
Yeah, and he made, especially in the second half, he made a lot of stops in the run game for little to no gain that were big gains in the first half. So, maybe there was some adjustment there, or maybe it was getting fired up because DeMario McCall made a very impassioned speech at halftime. Whatever it was, Tommy Eichenberg came to play, and was it a school record that he set for tackles?
I don't think it's school record.
Or was that a bowl record, a Rose Bowl record maybe?
Might have been.
So, tip our cap to him. Bryson Shaw also, I thought, played pretty well overall in the game in terms of number of tackles. Of course, a lot of the tackles he made, he had to make because guys at the line of scrimmage weren't making them. And, we've talked about this before, and I think these rumblings are getting louder. It's just that I don't think it's talent based on the star ratings and based on who all has recruited these players. It just doesn't seem like it's been a good year for Larry Johnson's group.
No, it hasn't. And I guess, Larry Johnson, there are a lot of rumors about, is he retiring? I think he's sticking around, but, we'll see. With Jim Knowles, maybe there will be a resurgence of Larry Johnson and getting the defensive line to be as dominant as they were previously.
Yeah, he's always been a really good coach. I don't know if there's been some distractions or what. I don't know if he's doing anything differently this year. But, it just hasn't been there this year from that position group. The defensive line has not been – you and I remember talking about our concerns going into the season, and neither of us was concerned about defensive line.
No, that's true. We thought defensive line would be the strength, and it didn't turn out that way.
No. So that's it. It's a wrap. The Rose Bowl ended things, and if you're in the national title hunt, only one team's fans go home happy at the end of the year. But if you don't make it, your team can go out a winner, and that's what Ohio State did. They went out with a victory.
And especially in such a glorious and prestigious bowl venue like the Rose Bowl. I mean, it was a great way to start off 2022.
Yeah. So big games from C.J. Stroud and Jackson Smith-Njigba, obviously. I think we've seen maybe some glimpses of what we might see from Tommy Eichenberg next year. So there's some reasons to be excited. Obviously, the rest of the I said this on Twitter. Imagine losing Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and not losing your best receiver. And also imagine losing those two and still having a better trio on the field the next year.
That's certainly a possibility. I mean, it remains to be seen.
Right. That's what could happen. This could be a better trio in 2022 than what we had in 2021 as far as talent's concerned. Now, whether or not they will all play it at that level right away, I mean, who knows? Obviously, they got a quarterback that can get them the ball. Probably no concerns with Jackson Smith-Njigba. Can the other two raise their level? Well, we'll have to wait and see. But the talent is certainly there. And, you know, we had Earth, Wind, and Fire for such a short time, Chip. But this next group looks like it's going to be fun. And they deserve to get their own nickname from the jump.
Yeah, let's give them an opportunity to, you know, kind of earn the respect and admiration of Ohio State fans. I mean, Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave certainly did their contributions. Jackson Smith-Njigba certainly. You know, I think, you know, Marvin Harrison Jr. certainly took a major stride. Remains to be seen. You know, is it going to be Julian Fleming? Is it going to be Emeka Egbuka? Who's to say that one of these hotshot freshmen that Brian Hartline just signed, if one of them doesn't emerge? So, you know, I think, you know, like, if anything, Ohio State fans should just take comfort in the fact that the wide receiving group looks very strong and healthy heading into 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Hartline, his recruiting, it's like a pizza delivery guy just keeps showing up at your house with better and better pizza, and you just don't know if you can eat all this pizza or what you're going to do with it all, but you're glad to have it.
There you go. Pizza delivery guy. There you go.
All right, Chip. Anything else from the Rose Bowl cross your mind that you want to talk about? I know we've been at this a long time, but it is the last show of the season.
No. I think, if anything, it was a great way to end 2021 and an even better way to begin 2022.
Yeah, so they go out a winner, and we will have to wait and see, you know, what 2022 holds in store. Obviously, lots will happen between now and opening day. Probably a lot will happen between now and the spring game in terms of coaching staff, in terms of, you know, there are two brand new commitments we didn't even talk about because we're not recruiting guys. We'll leave that up to Tom and Gerd and the recruiting guys. You know, Mark and Bill and all of those guys know more about them than we do. But you know, a couple of big recruits landed for the 22 and 23 classes in the last week. So, you know, as always, the off season is a time of change. I'm sure there'll be people in the portal before next year that leave. There'll be people that arrive via the portal, and that's what makes college football really kind of a year-round thing. It's just hard to sustain a podcast about it in the off season if you're not recruiting guys. Yeah,
I mean, the recruiting, like you said, you know, it's like that's kind of right now. That's where the focus is going to be between now and February. No announcement has been made as to when the spring game is going to take place. You know, defensive staff changes. I mean, there's a lot that's going to be happening. It's just right now is just kind of, you know, we're just not entirely sure what direction Ohio State football is going to take.
Yeah. All right. So, you know, overall, when you go into this season and you have the schedule Ohio State has, and you've got a freshman quarterback starting for the first time and a lot of changes on defense, you lose a lot of key players, and you think, well, this is a team we're not really sure what they're going to do. And at the end of the day, they lost 2 games, both against ranked opponents. And honestly, if we weren't spoiled, we would consider this a great season.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I think back to, I mean, during the John Cooper years, and by and large, like the vast majority of the time was ending the season on losing to Michigan and losing the bowl game. And that's not even counting. That's not even counting the other losses, like the inexplicable losses to Illinois that seem to happen on a yearly basis, those kind of things. So, yeah, Ohio State fans have certainly grown spoiled over the last 20 years. And I think, as I said a few moments ago, I think this was a great way to end 2021 and begin 2022.
Yeah, and a good weekend was finished up by the basketball team finally getting on the court after battling COVID. Hadn't played since December 11th, and seeing freshman Malachi Branham go off for 35 points in an overtime win at Nebraska. So, good weekend to be a Buckeye.
Absolutely.
All right, Chip. I think that's going to wrap up our season. You and I, as we record this, we're not really sure what our plans are for next season. So it's been a pleasure doing this show with you all season long and in the seasons past, obviously. And we'll have to wait and see. Is this the last Silver Bullets? Is it the last Silver Bullets with Buckeye Scoop? Is there something else in our future together as podcast co-hosts?
It's been a great season. I'm truly appreciative of having you, all the hard work that you put into the show and the podcast, and to our listeners. Like you said, our future is uncertain, but want to thank all of our listeners out there for not only this season, but for all seasons previous. And we'll try and keep you up to speed on what direction we take with the podcast.
That's right. And to find out, you're going to need to follow us on Twitter, I think. I'm afraid you're going to have to follow us on Twitter. Chip, what's that Twitter account?
I can be found on Twitter at Chip Minnich, last name spelled Minnich.
And I'm at Mike36Fan. You can find me there. I am the grumpy old Buckeye at Buckeye Scoop. You can go read my grumpy old Buckeye column, my final one of the season. It's on the page now over at the website, BuckeyeScoop.com. Look for that. And you'll see my thoughts from the win over Utah. Chip, you're a writer for Athlon Sports. You got anything coming up for the national championship or anything else you're writing about?
Not right now for the national. I mean, I'm going to offer up a score prediction probably in the next few days. I haven't really given it too much thought. I was just hit up for it by some of the other contributors today. But I have no doubt that for Athlon, they're going to hit me up when recruiting concludes or when spring football. So, yeah, keep your eyes open on athlonsports.com for future Ohio State-related articles from me.
All right. So follow us on Twitter, and we'll keep you posted as to what is going on with the future of the Silver Bullets podcast. When we ourselves figure that out, we will let you know. And in the meantime, it's been a blast doing this with you, Chip. I appreciate you. You are always very well prepared co-host. Sometimes I am not always as prepared as I should be with so many other things going on, but I really appreciate doing this with you. It's been a blast, and I wish you a great off season and a happy 2022.
I can't thank you enough for all of your hard work. You are a terrific host, a great and knowledgeable resource for Ohio State football. And again, I look forward to doing this podcast with you in some way, shape, or form in 2022. And again, thank you for all of your efforts on behalf of the podcast.
Thank you, sir. Thanks to Tony Gerdeman and to Mark Givler for the opportunity to be a part of the Buckeye Scoop family. And we'll see if we're still part of it next year. We're not sure really. We're still kind of reorganizing and figuring our way out. So we're just not sure. It's not necessarily the end. It's not necessarily even the end of Buckeye Scoop. We just don't know at this point. But we wanted to be honest with you listeners because you've always been great for us. And we do appreciate you being there because without you, we're just two guys talking to each other on headsets.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that does it for the 2021 season. There's nothing left for us to do, Chip. We've done it all. All there is left for us to do is the thing we do at the end, which is to say, go Bucks.
Go Bucks.